I'm going to do another kind of exploration about how we relate and relationship, which essentially is the foundation of everything. It is our relationship um, with ourself, and actually it's deeper than that. It's knowing our true self, knowing ourselves, the I below the I of all the identifications with, who we have concepts of ourselves to be, whether that's our career, whether that's our roles in life, all the different roles we might play, mother, father, child, lover, partner. So ultimately that relationship with self is the foundation of it all. And then it's about experiencing ourselves in relationship with others. And of course, that's the place where the hugest growth can happen. And my view is that if we all did this inner work and we were all committed to keeping our hearts open, and the way we keep our heart open is essentially to not close it. And the times that we close our heart are essentially when we react to the other in front of us, the person generally, or it can be a group of people, or it can be a concept or an idea we've read about, or all manner of things. When we react to that and we either disagree with it, or we feel antagonistic towards it, or we feel hurt by either the idea or the person, we close our hearts, and then of course the separation occurs. And ultimately what we all want is connection. I think all humans want to feel all right, really. They want to feel okay, they want to feel at ease. I mean, that's the kind of evidence. They want to feel good in themselves, and they want connection. And of course, often the moment they get connection, whether it's with anybody, whether they find a colleague they get on with, or they meet a new partner, or all manner of things, and it can feel very wonderful, and there's an opening. But often very quickly the person in front there's a difference, so they do something differently that we don't like, or they say something we don't agree with, or something happens to mean that there's a closing, there's a closing down, there's a reactivity, there's a shutting off to the other. And of course, ultimately, as I've kind of titled this, it is in the validating of differences that it leads to connection. So as I was saying, that I actually think really doing this inner work and committing to keeping our hearts open, and committing to clearing all of our own reactivity, all of our own judgments, all of the things that separate us from others, ultimately it would lead to harmony and peace worldwide, globally. It couldn't not. I'm not saying that's going to happen, not now anyway, but ultimately. And that if every single human was committed to recognizing that if they react, then it's something to do with them. If they judge, it's something to do with them. If they don't have the same opinion as someone and deem the other wrong, it's something to do with them. If every single person really went, okay, this is all about me, what would happen is that the connection would never sever, and the validation of the differences in the other would lead to connection. Now that would happen, I believe that would happen globally. But ultimately, if we can't even do it with our own friends or our own partners or our own children, then how on earth do people do it on a global level, or even our own colleagues, or even the person who we meet on the bus or the train? So the validation of the difference means that really it starts, I mean, it can be really powerful to see it in dialogue, that noticing, I think with dialogue's the place where with language people are often where they find difference in each other, where someone says something that the other doesn't agree with. So on a simple level, before we even talk about the reactivity, if we're in a situation, whether we're with friends or just chatting or in a business meeting or any manner of things, and somebody has an opinion that differs to ours, it's being able to absolutely validate that view. It's being able to, and this is where it helps to completely hear somebody, and in hearing somebody it often helps. I'll talk more about intentional dialogue later on, but it helps to really check we've heard what the person said, because sometimes we hear something different because we'll hear it from the filter of our own experience of the world. So if we check what the person said, that's an incredibly powerful starting point, because even if the opinion is a complete opposite to what we might think or believe or feel, because people get very attached to their opinions, to their values, to their beliefs, and therefore even if the person in front of us is absolutely convinced of their belief, their value, their opinion, and they're not going to move from it, and they're very identified with it, because people often are highly identified with their views and their opinions. But then if we are too, and we've got an opposite one, then all that happens is there's a loss of connection, because often what happens is people want to just try and make the other one think what they think, and or deem the person wrong who's thinking a certain way. So it's very helpful to, from the first position of validating difference, is to think that we exist in language a lot. Well, totally, really, we are always existing in language. So therefore, it's really important to slow everything down. And when we're in a conversation with somebody and they say something and we think the opposite, or we don't agree with it, or because it's perfectly valid for us to all have opinions, that's not a problem. It's how we hold them and how we identify with them. And ideally, we don't identify with them. We just might have them for a while or forever, but they're not who we are. So if somebody has a view that is opposed to ours or different to ours, the first thing is to hear it and therefore say what you've heard. So you might, say, you think that everybody should do education, all the way through to university, and that if they don't have an education all the way through and get a degree, they're not going to manage in the world. I've just made that up. But people often have very strong views about education. And we might hold another opinion, particularly somebody like me. I dropped out of university. So now I don't have a strong view about not following through with university or following through. So it's very easy for me to be able to have validated that person's view and say, oh, okay, so you feel that everybody needs to get an education all the way through, and that it's really, really important for them to be in the world with a degree, and that's the best way to be. And the person would say yes, and then you validate it and you say, oh yes, and you might know that the person's come from a family that's had that view and that they've done well having had that kind of education. So you can validate it and say, oh, really, that completely makes sense to me. I really get that you'd feel that way, given that, it's worked for you, and I can see that. So it's very important that we validate it. And then, if we want to, we can share the other view. We can say, well, I see that, and I can see that you feel that way, but I didn't have a university career, and it hasn't been a problem for me not to have that. But I've educated myself in other ways, and I have done trainings in other ways. So you end up having a dialogue, and if the person's open to that, they could say, oh, I see that you didn't go to university, but yes, you did do trainings and other things. What trainings did you do? And therefore I would then share what trainings I have done. And though what happens, of course, is the connection deepens, because each person genuinely gets to know one another. They find their different roots in life. They find, roots as in ROUTES roots, as well as probably the other roots, the roots of where we are kind of begun. But, and the conversation has no limits. And ultimately, in all our conversations take place in the space between us. As I was talking about last week, everything we put into this space is about, whether we're hurting it or healing it with our words, with our thoughts, with our actions. And if the dialogue is very intentional and we're completely validating the other, now even if they don't validate us, even if they think we're completely wrong, and they go, no, you can't possibly go through life without, I'm only just using that as an example. If we're not absolutely wedded to our opinion or our belief, the connection doesn't sever. We just will, not let the thing land in any way that's negative to us. When I say land, sometimes if people's opinions are completely shut down, people feel that they, sorry, just have a drink of water, they feel, they feel personally invalidated. They feel personally, rejected. And that's where the problems can arise. Whereas if someone just doesn't agree with where we're at, and we know that we are not our opinions, we're not, we are more than that. We're all that is. We are consciousness. We're having a human experience, and it's fun. We can play and experience and have relationships and have education or not have education. If we know that about ourselves, then if somebody rejects our view completely, and it's not a personal thing, and the connection doesn't sever. But of course, ultimately, what happens so often is connection breaks or doesn't break. We're all connected all the time. We can't ever be not, but in the kind of experience of being a human, having relationships, the person feels hurt, not heard, and everything crumbles. So I think from the conversational language perspective, first of all, if we endeavour to, 24/7 every day, really this inner work is 24/7. There is no time we're not doing it. It isn't something we do occasionally or just suddenly remember to do when we're suddenly having a difficult conversation. If we're always connected to coming back to presence, coming back to being aware, coming back to where we might be holding tightly to a view, tightly to a judgment, tightly to anything, we'll always be willing to clear it. But it means that in all our conversations, we're open to exploration, we're open to listening, we're open to learning, because every conversation has the possibility for expansion and learning about another person, even if they don't want to learn about us. And that's the ultimate, is to recognize that a lot of people are very wholly identified with their views, with their opinions, with their roles, with all these things in life. And also it's so the conversation is very, very important. Thinking about that in every single conversation you have, every single interaction. Have I really listened? Have I really heard? Have I jumped in with my own view? Have I negated what the person said and just gone, oh no, that's ridiculous? Or as I said, it's perfectly fine for us all to have different ways we like to live in the world. We like to think about things. We like to investigate. It's fun, but obviously it doesn't need to be divisive. It doesn't need to be that the person's wrong because they think a different way, and that extends to everything. Extends to everything, because ultimately there's going to be a lot of unconscious people in the world. There are a lot of unconscious people. They're putting all manner of things into the world which aren't healthy or helpful and are toxic, and we see it all over the place. We see it in in the news, we see it. We see it in social media. We see I think the power, I said this last week, the power of social media is wonderful in that we can share and connect, but it also can be a place of people putting, things unconsciously into the world. So we're not necessarily going to actually change that, but we will change it by being the change. So we will change it by our own inner work, in that we are always recognizing that we make the difference by being the difference, that we make the difference by listening to everybody, that we make the difference by clearing our reactivity. So if we see something going on that really we don't think should be going on, if we think there's something being said that really is not okay, if we see somebody that's being bullied or all manner of things, I'm not saying we wouldn't stop it, but actually the first port of call is to clear our reactivity and our judgment towards another. Now, I know that's a very steep curve for many people, to ultimately really not reject another human being. I think people are rejecting human beings all the time, from the smallest things they do to the hugest things that they'll do that don't please them. But if we are all the time being aware that we're going to be more powerful and more strong and more able to make a difference in the world because of our own inner difference, then if there is something that needs addressing, that we think that shouldn't be happening, we want to stop that, we'll do it from the place of our center point and in our center, and we make much more difference that way, because we're not condemning, we're not necessarily condoning some behavior or some words or some ways people are behaving, but we're not condemning the person, because it's not for us to judge or condemn anybody, but it is or ourselves. People often judge themselves, but it is for us to work deeply on anything that any reactivity we have, any tiny reactivity we have, because then we can validate. So now if we bring it back, I've gone out into bigger situation where we might be out in the world or seeing things in the world or seeing things globally, but then really if we bring it back into our day-by-day life, into our colleagues, into our families, into our friends, and notice that, are we reacting? Because if somebody again is doing something that we're reacting to, ultimately the first thing we need to do is clear our reactivity. When I say clear it, I mean not act out of it. So the energy rises up, we feel upset, we feel cross, we feel whatever it might be. If we act out of that, we're immediately breaking connection with somebody. We're immediately making them wrong, we're immediately closing our heart, and we're not validating the difference, whatever has happened. So there are so many things that on small levels can make people react in their families. People repeatedly not emptying the dishwasher, or repeatedly leaving their clothes about, or repeatedly being late, or any manner of things. So the first thing is, it becomes very normal for people to just get cross with each other, and families, some people have a view that in families it's okay to do that. Oh, it's our family, we can do it. But it's never okay to be reactive with other people. It's never okay to be upset and cross, and this work is 24/7. It is about being absolutely aware that, obviously I know bringing children up and things, there's such a path to tread, because there are times you need to correct their behavior, or you need to do all manner of things, but still, if you're not reactive, you won't break the connection. So even a child having a tantrum in a supermarket that needs to be picked up and taken out the supermarket, it's still, the work is still to work with your own reactivity, to work, because the connection isn't broken then. So you work with your own reactivity, whether it's crossness, embarrassment, whatever. You stay centered. You're able to give the child the warning, look, I'm giving you a count of 10, and I'm going to pick you up and take you out, and then you do it. Or it isn't about it's not about trying to reason with necessarily the child, and being able to say later, do you know what went on for you there? But all of this takes practice, and I do understand that all these situations where we're busy, there's lots going on, we might be working, we've got hundreds of things to do, messages nowadays, so many people are busy, super busy, that it takes more commitment to be all the time validating the difference in the other. Whether that's a screaming child, it is recognizing something's going on for the child. And as I say, it's not about trying to negotiate with a 2-year-old having a tantrum. It's about making sure that there's as far as possible, you are working to clear the reactivity so that the connection isn't broken, because the moment there's reactivity, you cut off the connection. And of course, we all survive people cutting off connection to us, because we've all been children and probably, and our parents get cross with us. But ultimately, and what I'm suggesting often seems very extreme, but it isn't. Ultimately, it's practice. It's like anything. It's practice, it's practice, it's practice. It's recognizing that if we, recognize that someone's behavior is different to ours, we're able to communicate with them in a very different way if we recognize that it isn't wrong. If we've, and I can see that children, partners, whatever, often there's so many differences that can be so irritating to everybody, that maybe you're the only one in your family to doing it. So therefore it seems like there can be chaos around with people reacting everywhere. But it is worth committing to doing this, even if it feels like a huge, huge hill, because ultimately this inner work, this presence, this clearing of all the reactivity does lead to absolute connection. It leads to connection with everybody. It leads ultimately connection to our essence, to our true self. It leads to connection with everybody we will meet. As I've said last week, it doesn't mean we're necessarily going to, spend time with everybody, but it leads to connection. It leads to a stillness that means that we can listen to them. We can validate what's going on for them. We can understand it. We can empathize. The connection never breaks. And it's worth at least remembering that it's a 24/7 thing. It's at least then remembering the times you forget, again, never to be horrible to yourself, because again, that's just loops the thing round, and it's not validating your journey. And any of you who work with me know that if the cycle has happened where you've not been able to validate somebody's difference, you've not been able to not react, you've not been able to do it, I will never go and, I might point it out, but I'd never cut off the love. And so therefore you mustn't cut off the love to yourself ever. So that's the first place. We must never cut off the love to ourselves. We mustn't judge ourselves. We mustn't invalidate ourselves. We mustn't get caught with that kind of painful place. Then that gets much easier for us to validate the other, validate the differences in everybody and everyone. And interaction by interaction, it is literally interaction by interaction, we can heal the world.